She was carrying an energy, a ball of energy, a ball of sadness, if you will, in her body, all those years. And it made her more sad than she otherwise would have been. And any situation that came up where she could have been sad, it was much easier for her to become sad, because part of her, in a very literal way, was already sad. Think about it. Part of her body, that part of her body that was within that sphere of energy, there was a constant feeling of sadness, a vibration of sadness stuck in her body. Isn't that amazing? That's how this works, you see. And so, specifically it was sadness about a Kennedy. So when John Kennedy Jr.'s son died, I mean, it just really amplified it. And so everyone was sad when that happened. But how many people wept for days, besides the family? You know, I'm sure, the family and the close friends. But here's a woman who never met any of the Kennedys, and she's experiencing that same emotion because of this trapped energy. So you see, these trapped emotions affect us because they make us, literally they inhabit our bodies, and whatever trapped emotions we have, anger, frustration, sadness, depression, whatever they are, they encumber us and they block us from being able to live the full lives we should be able to live, because they are resonating in our bodies at their own little frequency. They're like tuning forks in our bodies that are putting out not an audible tone, but an energy, a frequency of some negative energy, some negative emotion. If you have anger in your body, for example, from some event that happened long ago, if you have a trapped emotion of anger, if an experience that you're going through, if some event arises where you could become angry, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to become angry much more readily than you otherwise would, because part of you is literally already angry. Does that make sense? Literally angry. Now, in this woman's case, I wanted to know, all right, it's been 40 years or so since John F. Kennedy's death. Where has this emotion been all these years? Where did it lodge? Where has it been? And what kind of an effect has it had on those tissues? Because remember, your body is made of energy, and trapped emotions are made of energy, aren't they? But they're energies that are vibrating at a negative vibration, you see. And so wherever they are going to distort the tissues of the body. And they can cause organ malfunction, they can cause pain, they can cause all manner of trouble for you, you see. So I thought to myself, I want to know, where has this thing been all these years? Because this was a really interesting case, right? So I just asked her body. Do you think the subconscious mind of this woman knew where this emotion was? Absolutely it knew. So I just divided the body into two halves. And I just asked, well, is it on the right side of the body? And her body said no. Is it on the left side of the body? Yes. And I asked, well, is it below? I just drew an imaginary line across her waist. I said, is it below this line? No. Is it above this line? Yes. And so we figured out it was in the left breast. And at that moment, she and I looked at each other, because 4 years before, she'd had that breast removed. Why? Well, why do they remove breast cancer? She got a malignancy, had a mastectomy, right? Well, what role do you think that trapped emotion played in creating that cancer? Do you think it had something to do with it? Yeah, absolutely. I think it had everything to do with it. And even though that breast had been removed, that emotion, that energy was still there, still resonating and hitting in her energy field, still making her sad. And it was an amazing thing, you know, and we've seen many, many cases like that. I learned early on that trapped emotions can create tremendous physical pain and discomfort. And one of the first cases that I saw, in fact, was a woman who came to me who thought she was having a heart attack. Her name is Debbie. And she probably a year or so, but one day she came into me and she was really concerned because she was having this, she felt this crushing kind of chest pain. Her left arm was completely numb. And the left side of her face was numb. And, you know, this sounds serious, doesn't it? It sounds really serious. So I immediately put my staff on alert. We might need medical assistance on this. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I tested her vital signs. They seemed okay. And I started to test her body to ask what was happening here. I tested her heart circuit, and down her arm went. Her heart was imbalanced. And I asked her body, is this imbalance being caused by a trapped emotion? And the answer was yes. And the emotion that came up for her was anguish, as I recall. And so I said, okay, let's see when this occurred. And we went back 3 years, and we found out that's when it had started, 3 years before. And she started to cry. I mean, she burst into tears. And she said, I can't believe that's showing up now. I can't believe that's affecting me. I thought I dealt with all that. And I said, well, can you tell me what happened? She said that 3 years before, her husband had had an affair. And it destroyed her marriage and really destroyed her life for a while. But she put her life back together. She went to therapy. She did all the things people are supposed to do. She even got remarried. But the emotion that had become trapped in her body, that anguish emotion, was still there, distorting the tissues to a point where it was actually creating all the symptoms of a heart attack. You see? Now, when we released that emotion, the symptoms just were gone within seconds. I mean, the chest pain was instantly gone. The feeling came back into her arm just whoosh, that fast. And she left the office about 15 minutes later and, felt completely fine. Now, I often think about that, and I think she would likely have died, I think, if we had not released that energy. What organ in her body was most likely, do you think, maybe to fail? Her heart. Yeah, I think that eventually, sooner or later, she would have died probably of a heart attack. And in a way, she would have really died of a broken heart, right? Nobody would have ever known. They would have buried her, and there would have been a funeral, and it would have been, it would have just been unnoticed. But that's the reality. See, that's what would have happened. I had a patient who came in once who had tennis elbow. His name was Mark. And he had tennis elbow, and it was so excruciating and so bad. His arm was in a sling. He couldn't turn the keys to start his car without excruciating pain. I mean, it was terrible. And so I worked on him for a week doing the regular traditional type of work. And I had had a lot of success over the years working with tennis elbow, just doing chiropractic adjustments and physical therapy and so on. I never had a problem before. I couldn't make a dent in this guy's tennis elbow after a week. Now, I was just learning. This is years ago. I was just learning about trapped emotions. And I wasn't making any headway with the regular methods, and so I thought, well, maybe there's a trapped emotion here. I'll ask. And so I did, and his body said, yes, there's a trapped emotion that's involved in this. So we found the first trapped emotion, and it had to do with a girl that kind of dumped him in high school. In fact, all the emotions, there were 5 or 6 trapped emotions that were all stuck in the tissues of his forearm, and they all had to do with girls who had dumped him in high school. He got dumped a lot, I guess. Anyway, now, the amazing thing about it is, every time we'd find one of these and release it, his pain level would instantly go down. Boom, boom, boom. When we got to the very last one and released it, his pain was completely gone. Now, if I hadn't been there to see it, I might not still believe it. But it really happened. And it was funny because his wife was sitting there, and we're going through these girls. Well, was it Marcia? No. Was it Julia? No. Cheryl? Oh, it was Cheryl. Oh, yeah. And he'd say, yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was bad. It was funny. But I learned from that, you see, that these emotions, these trapped emotions, have the ability to distort your physical tissue. Your physical tissue is just made of energy, and they're made of energy, but they're negative. They'll distort that tissue, and they can cause pain and malfunction and discomfort. And it's an amazing thing. He never had another problem that I know of with his elbow. Okay. My wife had a situation where it was kind of similar to this. She was, we were at church one day, and I was in a meeting. She was in a different meeting, and all of a sudden she comes in and gets me. She says, we've got to go home. And because I'm in terrific pain. So we went home. I opened the door of the house, unlocked the door, and she burst past me and fell down on the floor and curled up in a fetal position, right? And so I'm desperate to try to help her. And she's got this pain, and I'm testing her, and I figured out that it was coming from her right ovary, this pain. And she'd never had anything like this before, and I'm testing her, and what I found was it was being caused by trapped emotions, but there was more than one. Now, trapped emotions will oftentimes kind of nest in an area. By the way, the story I just told you about, the tennis player, Mark was a tennis player in high school, see? And so he was constantly incurring micro-trauma. He was always kind of hurting his elbow a little bit, you know, because he's playing tennis. He's using it, he's abusing it a little bit.